Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So, everyone's talking about being socially responsible and trying to do the right thing for the environment and the world and, those who you're going to leave behind. So, let's talk about the value and being socially responsible when you're investing, right? Because once considered a niche area of an investment practice, socially responsible investing, it embraces a wide investment audience that includes individuals, including those of high net worth and, medium net worth, all those in between, and institutions such as pension plans, endowments, and foundations, religious tenets, political beliefs, special events, and, the broad, remit of corporate responsibility, such as green investing and social welfare, they all drive this investment practice. Um, but let's get into this by starting with some examples, right? Because socially responsible investing expresses the investor's value judgment, right? Of which several approaches can be used. So one example is going to be when an investor avoid companies or industries that offer products or services, that the investor perceives to be harmful, right? Such companies were the tobacco companies, alcohol companies, arms and defense companies and industries, right? They're commonly avoided by people who try to be socially responsible investors. Now, another example is considering a performance ranking in terms of how well a company performs, not only in terms of financial metrics, but also regarding social, environmental, governance, and ethical issues, right? And then another example might be involving active engagement between the company's shareholders and its management. And then one of the last ones is going to be there is the activist tact that involves the investor advocating for specific issues, right? So one or a combination of these approaches can be a really massive driver in the process of portfolio management and fiduciary oversight. Moreover, right, the practice is global, right, with different approaches emphasized in various countries as a function of their culture, their government, business environment, and of course, even their interrelationships of these factors, right? Now, as a side note, just to kind of remember, what counts as socially responsible or not socially responsible has led to differing opinions about whether these approaches yield competitive returns, right? So, for whose benefit is all this, anyways? Well, socially conscious investors may assume a more holistic view of a company when making investment decisions, looking at how it serves its stakeholders, as well as creditors, management, employees, the community, the customers, even suppliers, right? And within this context, socially responsible investment seeks to maximize the welfare of people and their environment while earning a return on one's investment that is consistent with the investor's goals. Now, on the surface, these two notions may appear contradictory. Right? For example, there may be an implicit cost of such an approach to the extent that it eschews profitable companies and sectors. Tobacco, alcohol, firearms, and gambling have been very lucrative, right? However, to a socially conscious investor, their inclusion in a portfolio would fail to serve the investor's objectives of living in a world void of conflict and legal stimulants and depressants. As with any investment approach, the socially conscious investor needs to remember a couple things, right? You need to define, you know, his, her, or your, risk and return objectives and constraints. As to the latter, the investor needs to determine what their socially conscious constraints are, right? These may differ considerably, depending upon the investor, of course. Muslims who wish to be compliant with the Sharia law would exclude any companies connected with the production, sale, and distribution of alcohol, any financial institution that lends, and any business that profits from gambling. Investors opposed to armed conflict as a means of dispute resolution may avoid any company or industry associated with defense, national security, or firearms. Once an investor defines their constraints, they must decide upon an approach to implement them. right? However, that's going to be, be it the use of inclusionary or exclusionary screens, right? Best practices, criteria, or advocacy. Now, the type of investor may determine the most suitable approach, right? So, as an example, advocacy and dialogue with a company or industry would be better suited to a large public pension fund. Consider the work of, you know, the Swiss billionaire activist Martin Ebner, right? Uh, he's an example of an individual shareholder activism. By contrast, an individual investor working with an advisor would find the screening process more feasible. Now, socially investing has implicit costs. The returns potentially foregone through the exclusion of companies with unacceptable products or business practices, right? And explicit costs. For those considering an active approach, fees for exchange traded and mutual funds tend to be on the higher side. For investors seeking passive management, there are fewer, indexes and, to replicate. Now, diversification is always important, right? And screens might hamper that, right? Unintentionally or otherwise. Utilizing this type of traditional investment framework would appear to make the process manageable, so long as the investor weighs the costs and benefits of this type of investment approach carefully. However, as always, there could appear to be a dilemma upon whose horns the investor invariably would be impaled. For example, if investment in such vice products as alcohol and tobacco is, something, to be a socially conscious investor, right? It's just something that they don't want. What about the transportation and energy sector, right? After all, the products have to be shipped to the point of sale, which requires various means of transport, which in turn requires fuel. These types of considerations make the precise definition of one's socially responsible investment goals are all the more crucial. Now, make sure you guys remember that depending upon the perspective of each person, companies may display characteristics that are both irresponsible and responsible. So, what do we take away from all of this? What's the bottom line? Okay, well, socially responsible investing reflects an investor's values. Now, while the opportunities in this realm of investment management have grown considerably, one may not ignore the best practices of investing. Investors must clearly define their goals when undertaking this sort of approach, recognizing its potential trade offs and clearly articulating a policy that considers all the variables when looking to maximize the good over the plentiful and abundant. Now, the last one is going to be risk management and attention to costs because these are essential. Research seems to indicate that results from socially conscious investing are not more statistically significant than a more conventional approach. So whether you guys, want to be socially responsible when you're investing or not, or however you want to go about doing it, hopefully I've kind of opened you up to some of the questions you guys need to ask yourselves if you're going to go this way when you want to invest, right? I hope you guys enjoyed this video, got some good information. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, really appreciate it if you did. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Until I see you guys in the next video, y'all be safe.